today we're going to be talking about the 10 things you should avoid when you sous vide. We're trying to keep you from making those mistakes that could be disastrous to your cook. Stay tuned for number 10 because it's really important and it's not obvious and it's important for your health safety. So without further ado, let me jump into it. Number 1, beware that acids can make your meat mushy. So if you're marinating with citrus, you're used to doing that on your non-sous vide cooking, your more traditional cooking, or you're using vinegar, use those sparingly, particularly when you're doing longer cooks because it will break down that meat in a much more rapid form when you're cooking sous vide. So be aware of that. Number 2, do not overstuff your container. We really need that water to be able to circulate around the veggies or protein or what have you freely. So do not overstuff your container. Make sure there's plenty of room. In that same vein, if you're bagging multiple pieces of meat or veggies or what have you in a bag, try and spread them out. Don't stack them. Put them side by side and that'll help the water circulate around them. If you do stack them, you're going to need to cook for much longer than you would if they're side by side. Number 3, try and always use a lid, particularly if you're cooking for more than 6 hours, because what we don't want is your cook to get ruined because there was too much evaporation, the machine shut off, or sometimes the machine will shut off because there's too much condensation buildup from that steam onto the unit itself and it shorts out. Avoid that at all costs. Use a lid. It'll make your machine far more efficient and just will avoid disaster. So use a lid. Number 4, adding fat to your bag can actually draw a lot of the flavor out of the meat. So this is for proteins in particular, but know that adding fat, so whether it's butter or whether it's oils, things of that nature, can actually dull the flavor of your meat. Number 5, if you're using Ziploc style of bags, make sure they're freezer grade. Why is that? Because the quality of the plastic is higher, the quality of the seal is better, all things that are very important to your sous vide cook to avoid disaster. So use freezer grade bags. Number 6, use a trivet. The last thing we want is a busted countertop. The transfer of the heat from the sous vide cook can damage your countertops. Use a trivet or fold a towel over and keep that underneath your container. Do everything you can to avoid a busted countertop or a damaged countertop. Number 7, sear technique is key. So we're doing everything we can not to actually cook the meat, but to only sear it. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that protein is really dry. And so you want to thoroughly dry it with a paper towel. Sticking it in the fridge or quickly in the freezer can also help dry it rather quickly. And it will also help prevent some carryover cooking. So at all costs, what we're trying to avoid is sort of a gray band. When you cut through the meat and you see that cross section, you want to avoid a gray band. The way to do that is to have a hot pan if you are indeed doing it in a pan, if you're searing in a pan, or use a torch or something of that nature. You want to make sure your protein is dry like we talked about. And then thirdly, you want to use a oil or a fat with a high smoke point. So something like an avocado oil is great, something like ghee is great, or clarified butter. Those are all great options, but what we want to avoid at all costs is a gray band because we've undone a lot of what the magic of sous vide is, which is that even edge to edge consistent temperature if we see that gray band. Number 8, store-bought vacuum sealed foods should not be assumed safe to sous vide in that original packaging. Why? Because that package may have used glue for the binding, which can get undone during the sous vide process. So it's always better to bag the meat yourself. And often if you think about something like chicken breast, you have a lot of liquid in that bag, which is not good for that sous vide cook. You'd much rather get that liquid out of there, start with something that doesn't have liquid and let the liquid expel as you're going through it. Much better option. So rebag every time is a safe way to go. Number 9, don't cook under 130 degrees for a prolonged period of time. And let's get into a little more detail around that. Below 130 degrees is where you're deemed out of the safe zone. Bacteria will multiply rather rapidly. So you don't want to cook, I would say cap it at 2 hours under 130. I know a lot of people like their steaks under 130. I do too for something like filet mignon, but you don't want to cook for more than 2 hours in that zone just because you really want to be safe. You don't want to get sick from your food. So cap out your time cooked to 2 hours when you're under 130. And number 10, do not use raw garlic in your cooks. Why is that? It's because, one, you're not cooking at a high enough temperature for that garlic to cook. So oftentimes it'll just add bitterness to your food, which most people don't like anyway. And then the bigger issue is below, call it 140 degrees, you can actually get botulism from that garlic. I'll leave it to the experts to tell you exactly what botulism is, but suffice to say, it's something you should avoid at all costs. So just avoid raw garlic in your sous vide cooking altogether. Garlic powder works great. You can still get garlic flavoring, just don't use raw garlic. You can even pre-cook garlic and then put it in if you like, that's all fine. I hope that was helpful. If it was, please subscribe to my channel, give us a thumbs up.